way I want it. You know that I'm always honest. Stay away from those who are toxic. Keep them out your face, no way, you don't want them, yeah.
Don't try to drain my energy. The enemy is everything. It's mentally, unhealthily, spreading like a rare disease. But I won't let it get to me. I don't need your therapy. I can leave a legacy of leading by intensity. Come on, we can fight this. Freedom is priceless. Spread just like a virus. Living in a crisis. Do you feel courageous? Do you seek greatness? Trust me, you can take it. Go on and take your aim.
I'm built to last with the webs I'm weaving. I can change the past with all I'm achieving. Got my foot on gas, never stop competing. If you break like glass, then this life's gonna eat 'em. Make mistakes real fast, then you learn how to beat 'em. If you take off the gas, you can see all the healing. If the pain's in the past, move on from the grieving. Put your foot on the gas, no, never stop competing, yeah.
Hello, Cal. We are live.
I'm in the background here, like dropping it like it's hot. What an intro!
Yeah, I really like using my software. I've been
That's awesome.
Yeah, I got a bunch of different ones, so I thought I'd make a new one for you. So feel privileged. That was the first time I did that one.
Oh, that's awesome. It had like for me, it was like a hip hoppy vibe, and that's what like my daughter's a national hip hop dancer, so I was like, whoop, whoop. She's in the background going, yeah, drop.
Yeah, and it's got a message. It's built to last. You know, that's what it's saying. You know, it's something about the freedom, and you know what I mean. So it's kind of a poppy kid. Yeah. You know, I'm old, but hey, I want to keep up with the times. Anyway, hello everybody. I'm so happy to see you all. This is Kel, and she's very well known in the Making a Murderer community. She's from Australia. That's where that lovely accent comes from. And I'm sure you've seen some of her YouTube channel videos. If you haven't, please go see them. I really, really liked them, Cal. They were great. Your puzzle pieces, that was really good. I like them. So anyway, I'm going to let Cal tell you a little bit about her. And then, you know, I'll ask her the same questions I ask everybody else. And please take the poll. And I'm not going to ignore the chat. I'm just not going to say hi to everybody yet. I will when we get some questions. Okay, Cal, tell us all about yourself.
Okay, so like Linda said, I live in Australia, Western Australia. It is currently 7:37 in the morning. I work in an emergency department here. I work in the triaging sector, where you go into emergency and you go, oh, I got a sore gut. That's where you come and meet me. And then I have the higher position where I work on flight, which is where I work with the doctors. And what I do up there is I basically help admit patients. I do fund checking. I help transfer patients to other hospitals I do priority ones. So if someone comes in with cardiac problems or a death situation, I'm involved. I do the coding for the doctors, so the diagnosis coding. That's how I was able to have a bit of a understanding of people like symptoms. You kind of get self-taught when you're doing all the you're reading all the notes all the time and the diagnosis, so you're matching up codes, so you're getting an understanding of what means what. So I kind of did that. I've done that for going on almost 9 years now. I've got 2 lovely children, married. I was on Wife Swap Australia, a reality show.
You were good. It was good. I mean, there's another YouTuber that was on that, and believe me, she was, you know what I mean? You were fun and you were good. Everybody go check it out. I mean, it really is good.
Yes. Yeah, it was
don't hold back.
It was definitely a fucking experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. My husband and kids said to me, you ever pull that shit again and put us in that position, you quit as a mother. I was like, yeah. They had a totally different experience than me. But as an experience itself, you can't fault it. How many families can turn around and say they've done it?
Yeah. Can I ask you something? Do you have frozen sandwiches?
Don't even go there. But I still from today get recognized, and the first thing people say to me is, how's your frozen sandwiches? I'm like, oh, shut up. And then I went straight after the show aired, and I went to the shops, and ironically, I bought bread. And I went up to the cash register, and the ladies that were behind there were looking at me, and they were giggling. And I could see one of them sheepishly got her courage to say, "Oh, are those bread packets for the frozen sandwiches?" I'm like, yeah, real funny. I'm getting over it. But yes, it definitely isn't. But yeah, things like that. It was a bit of a changing experience. The children had to get special passes at school because it got a bit overwhelming, because every kid wants to be your friend all of a sudden when you've made TV. Latoya thought it was hilarious because she was portrayed as the little snotty bitch in it, which was
She was. She
essentially
wasn't giving
put
up
on
her phone.
yeah, it was a little bit of a dynamic behind the scenes that were asked for her to kind of turn things up a little bit. But she said, "Oh, my status has gone from, queen to goat." Like, everyone's like, "Hell yeah, Toya, you tell that bitch." We're talking about 17, or at that stage she was 14, 15. So the attitudes of, teenagers are all like, power to the teenagers.
Yeah.
So besides that, it was definitely an experience and a half, but that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I'm down to earth. On my time off, I go shark fishing. We catch tiger sharks, tag them, and then release them to.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty much us.
Well, that's exciting.
And if I'm not doing that, I'm working on making it better.
Having fun with the kids, because you only live once, right?
I only live once, but
right.
In all honesty, in my downtime, it is this case. I put my head into it 100%, as you know, and I think we're both on the same page here. We've always been. I'm very logical.
Yes.
I don't believe in rabbit holes. I think rabbits belong in rabbit holes. I don't deny anyone that does. I think it's great to have the diversity of everyone thinks different. If we all thought the same, how boring would the world be? And I respect that. But there is some boundaries that I think people have crossed in the community in terms of what you should not think, and rabbit holes itself. So, I get it. I get, where people come from. It's just like, you don't shit in my pocket and I won't shit in yours, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's in every case that you see in the YouTube world. They all have their conspiracy corners. And some people choose to stay down them, and some people go by the facts and what's logical and common sense. I mean, sometimes it's not that difficult. It's just real common sense to put a case together, I mean, like, how did they do this? Or were they messed up here or whatever? I mean, you take it a little far. I mean, do experiments.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And you film them while you're doing them. And
over 300.
That's hands-on. That's hands-on sleuthing. Okay. I mean, I don't see too many people that reenact things. Allie Epperson did, but you really do. Do you want to say what you did? I don't know if you want to, or if you don't, you can just say, "Hey, I experiment."
Oh no, I because I work in emergency and I work with some of the top consultants in Western Australia. We're talking high qualified doctors. And I've got them all onto the Making a Murderer saga, and they're all just like, one of them had already kind of watched it, and he's actually pro, wrongful convictions. He's actually had a little bit of background in it, which I was shocked about, and his heart melts for Brendan. He's just like, that could be my kid. The Stephen thing, I agree, he's innocent, but I lean more towards Brendan. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I think we all go there. And then the other two hadn't watched it, and they got onto it, and one of them came to me and said, "This is a joke, right? Is this even real, or is this a mockery, like a mock documentary where it's a joke about hillbillies?" And I'm like, "No, dude, it's actually real." And they're like, "No," because they had only, I think, watched the first episode at this stage, and they're like, no, I literally turned it off because I thought you were pulling the piss. You told me it was a documentary. I said, "It is." And they're like, "Oh." So they went back and watched it, and that's when I went to them and I said, "Listen, I want to do some experiments," because when they kind of got to the part with the blood in the RAV, they all came to me and gave me an opinion and went, and I'm going to say it as delicately as I can, but the most Australian way I can, he's fucked. And I'm like, and why? And they're like, "That blood, man." And I'm like, I know, so help me. So we sat down, and it took us like 40, there was 3 of us, the 3 consultants plus me, so 4. And we sat down and it took 40 minutes to just talk about what we would need to do to pull off an experiment. What factors, what elements of the case do we need to know? What medical side of it do we need to know? They had to kind of basically teach me the physics of blood. I had to have a quick blood lecture of how coagulation works, and it was like a little education segment for me as well. And then when we kind of went from there, and then the next day that I got everything prepared, and then they said, okay, you're on a very, because there was a time frame as well for us, because real blood, fresh blood, has a turnover very quickly. So once you bleed, it goes into coagulation immediately. And you have a very short window period to use it before you get the clots, and then it gets spoiled and you can't use it. So one of the doctors said, listen, let's do it at your place out front of your house. So it's a matter of moving really quickly, because usually there's about a 15-minute window period, and we don't want to get it to coagulation stage because we need to keep it in liquid form. So I'm like, yep. So I literally, all my experiments are done for my own blood. It's basically for safety procedures as well. I don't want to be playing with someone else's blood.
Right, of course.
and thank God it was, because in one of the experiments, I pricked myself with my own needle, and then I realized how dangerous that could have been.
Yeah.
So my whole objective for the blood, people always ask me that, what were you trying to get out of it? And I'm glad people actually do take the time to ask me that.
Right.
I won't lie. My first objective was, I am following the case, and I wanted to see whether it was possible, whether blood could have been taken from the sink. I wanted to see if I could follow Kathleen's narrative.
Right.
To understand where she's going with it and get on board.
Right.
Then I realized I needed to also understand EDTA blood. I needed to understand it because I needed to know why Jerry and Dean chose that route to use.
Yep.
So being in the field that I am, I had the advantage of both. I had the advantage of the tubes, the EDTA tubes, which is the purple tops.
Right.
And I had the advantage of having cannulas put in my arm so I could use my own blood. So freshly. So that's basically what I really wanted to do. When I started it, I didn't realize how complex this really is to do. People think you can just take blood and throw it around.
Yeah.
Fuck, no, you can't. You have to have the tools. You have to have, the things I battled with alone was the temperature. I had the advantage. The reason why I chose my home as the experiment grounds is I live in a very modern, updated, very beautiful home. And the way it was decked out is I have air conditioning in every room and even my bathrooms. So in the summer, I can get out and set my bathroom as freezing cold that I'm jumping out and I'm needing to put 3 towels on me, and I can get out of the shower in the winter and put it up heat and I don't even need a towel. So I knew automatically that my house was the right place because I could set the temperature.
Right.
So I used the bathroom. And my children for a week had to use, because we have 2 bathrooms, they had to use mine. No one was allowed to enter that room.
Nobody in the experiment.
No one was allowed to go into the bathroom because I had to make sure that I kept that control of the temperature. There was days I'd go in every few hours to keep an eye on it and using thermometers and checking. And if I noticed that the temperature was going higher or lower, I would adjust it. I was in there some days for hours on the ground, placing ice packs on my surfaces just to make sure I'm maintaining the right temperature, which is all documented. It's all filmed, and I go through why I'm doing it and explaining it. Because what I did do was, when me and the consultant sat together, we went back and even checked the temperature of the week from the 31st in Wisconsin. So again, I'm in Australia, and I have to be realistic. Our temperatures are completely different. So, so I could never get it perfect, but I could at least get it to what I could maintain some kind of balance.
Right.
So that's what I did. I really got involved with that.
And you tried all kinds, like you tried to rehydrate and flakes, right?
Yep.
and
So,
make a
yep,
smear or whatever, or drop. I
yep.
remember seeing it when you made that drop and it flipped up and just flaked
Mhm.
off the whole thing clean as hell.
I know. So I'm so glad you're one of the people that I have shown this to. There's very
Yeah,
limited people that have seen it because
it was
um,
excellent.
I have got over 300 files of which were contain video plus pictures. So it's a lot to siphon through because a lot of it can be it's hours of just watching something dry, which is quite boring, and it kind of at the end it doesn't really fit into anything. It's just
Hmm.
was just something that I was doing. So I've kind of got to go through and go, you know what? Although that's interesting for me, it doesn't really mean anything to this case. So it's a matter of going through and sorting out what does hit for this case.
Right.
And for that example, when I dropped that blood in the ignition, it was the ignition one I showed you, right? The
The
blood in the
one on
car.
the stick shift and the,
Yep.
yeah,
So that objective was to show how quickly it dries and what the coagulation stage happens and how we get to flake form. As you saw with your own eyes,
yes,
within minutes it was dry and it literally peeled off and flaked
popped
off
right up.
itself, popped right off itself and created like a what would you
Like
say,
a chip or a
like
flake,
a
or
chip, like
yeah,
a flake. And that's what I found was interesting.
perfect
So I'm like,
shape. It
wow,
didn't even crack.
it
It
didn't
was,
even crack. It just
yeah,
popped.
perfect
Which
shape.
you watch with your naked eye, you watch it actually
I
happen.
did.
Yeah. And
I did.
so I then, when I was doing my experiment in my bathrooms, I found that I used I had to end up moving away from my car because I couldn't control the temperature in there. And I was finding that it was affecting my results because, I couldn't control it. So when I went into the experiment and I went back to the drawing board and I was like to the doctors and shit, I can't use the car. And they're like, yep, we had a feeling this could happen. And I went, shit. So I rang up a car dealer and I said, I've got a situation. I kind of gave them a bit of a rundown and they laughed at me. And I said, do you guys have any panels? And they're like, well, no, not really. Not that we can give you. In Australia, we're a bit different. We can't just go and salvage
Yeah,
shit so easily. They're like, we
they must have
can't.
thought you were nuts.
Yeah, so they did, but they loved it. They actually
Yeah.
like, we're going to go watch this show now. I don't know if they did because I never called back, but they gave me a few. They said, there's things around your house, ironically, that you could probably use. What you're looking for is like a clear surface, a hard plastic, and it's got to have like a texture on it where there is like a smooth surface. You find that and you don't need a panel. You can use that because that is what panels are made of. It's a hard plastic with a coating over it.
Yeah.
So I came home and I was looking around and everything I was looking at, it was either wood or metal. I'm like, no, this is
Like a
impossible.
remote.
And I was looking down and I was on the phone to Caf and I was looking down. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to use. Like, I can't get a panel what am I going to do? And as I looked down, I couldn't believe it. Right in front of me was an Aqua hard plastic, high top range vacuum top, clear surface on an angle like a bloody panel. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, you're not going to fucking believe this. And I tap on it and I ran out to my husband. I said, what kind of like material do you think this is? And he gives it a tap. He goes, oh, it's a good quality vacuum. It's a hard plastic. I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, I found it. So the irony of it is it's Aqua. And you saw this in the natural light. The moment I add a light to it with a flash, because I had to do everything flash on, flash off to capture every angle, every movement.
Every little cell that went into each other and how it coagulated.
Yeah. So it changes. And I'm like, wow. So
Quite differently than KZ's. I mean,
yeah,
really a lot different.
yeah. So with the blood flakes itself, though, I noticed that when I started using this in the controlled bathroom, I was noticing that whether it was EDTA blood or fresh blood, what was happening was without it, because once I place the blood down, I don't touch the.
Can you explain just briefly for some people what EDT blood is and regular blood without it, please?
So regular blood is obviously your standard components of all your like your cells, your materials, and all that. Where there's nothing in it, it's just fresh. It goes through a coagulation
Unpreserved.
stage, unpreserved. Once it exits the body, it's like dead blood. It automatically goes into a cycle. There's 5 stages. It is very complex to kind of get in this thing, so I'm just going to really break it down as quickly as I can. So that will all get explained when I finally get through it. But so yeah, fresh blood is unpreserved, straight from the arm or whatever wound, and it doesn't have any kind of coagulating agents in it that keeps it from not dying and drying. Where EDTA is when you put your blood into an EDTA vial, it has a component in the bottom, like a gel that it's hard to see, but it's there. And what it does is it adds to your blood and it preserves it, which is the other word, preserves. And I'll tell you something really interesting. My EDTA, I started my experiments on the 18th of December of 2021. No, 2020, my apology. And it's still rocking. There's still blood in my EDTA blood, my vial. I can pull it out and still use it as an experiment as of today.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it does hold, and it has obviously got a longer life, where fresh blood doesn't. Fresh blood.
Is that in the refrigerator or just out on a shelf?
No, mine's just, I kept it as authentic as I can. I've put it in a box and I've put it in
just like what they kept in the evidence room.
Exactly right.
Right.
I tried to keep it everything as I could.
Right.
So that's basically what that is, the difference. One's preserved, one isn't.
Right.
The irony of EDTA with a lot of research we did was EDTA is in quite a lot of household stuff, like right down to,
salad dressing,
everything, conditioner, salad dressing,
shampoo.
Yeah, everything. It's everywhere because it's an agent that stops things from going off.
Yep, from like getting mildewy or whatever, right?
And from like
or activating
it. Yeah, so it's everywhere. And ironically, in the O.J. Simpson case, when we kind of had a look at that, when the EDTA, because that's the only time EDTA has kind of come into a case significantly. The defense was trying to prove opposite to what they were in the Making a Murderer. So Making a Murderer was trying to see if it was there and trying to rule it out from me being in the blood. But their defense was trying to prove why it would be there, why you would see it. It's because it's in so much things these days that it could have been put there because of, it got contact with something that has EDTA in it. So that's the only time we've kind of seen EDTA come in to a court case before. That's why I'm a little bit icky about the FBI's conclusion with EDTA, because I don't believe it was ever properly, with a conclusion. I know that obviously KZ has now done her own testing and has come back and said, nope, it's definitely fresh blood. We've aged it. It was definitely Stephen. He was at the time. And I get that. I do, and I accept it as well. But I still did the EDTA testing for me. I did it so I could understand why Jerry Imbuting was going down that road, because Stephen has even said, I told him about a potential sink blood tampering with, and they didn't run with it. So I wanted to see why not.
Right. How plausible was it?
Not? How plausible was it? Was it possible? Could have been done? And what you would have needed to be able to do it. So basically that's pretty much where I went with it. It took
and it isn't as easy as everybody thinks.
It is definitely not as easy.
You cannot rehydrate coagulated blood, correct?
You cannot if you are a standard person. I'm guessing you definitely could if you're in a controlled lab. You have the right kind of tools and chemicals to kind of bring it back. But even then, to the naked eye, and Dr. Silkman and I speak about this regularly,
you'd see it.
You see it. There is a definitive change in the
thin
texture.
And darker.
It actually goes lighter because it's watered down components in it. So it waters it down, and you see it go lighter. And
so
it just
what do you think the chances of them rehydrating a swab of blood and swabbing the RAV? It was
I
quite light.
I don't believe the blood on the ignition came from a swab initially. I think what we see here is it was swabbed 3 times with a solution that would have diluted it. That's why we're seeing it, because it's not
Okay.
in situ. That's why we're seeing the swab, like the swab
Okay.
look that we see, because it was already been swabbed. I think it was placed by the tip of a tool, like whether that be a syringe or a pipette. I don't know what you guys call it. We call them like droppers.
Yeah, a little drop or a pipette.
Yeah.
That's what they're called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I believe that's how it was.
So it
used.
have to be liquid form of
It has
blood,
to be
whole
liquid
blood.
form. It has to be some kind of solid blood. It can't be somewhere that it started. And me and Dr. Silkman talk about this regularly. If it was, for example, if it was from a sink, it would have had to have been a matter of, for my personal opinion at this stage, someone would have had to have been standing practically
dripped
next to him, watching it drip with the tool in their pocket ready to go, because your time frame it changes. When you look at the blood, the drips don't have any forms of clotting in it, and that's the first thing you see is you get these little specks of like harder blood in the liquid, and that's because it's coagulating. It goes into like a crystallized form, and you don't see that. It looks very smooth. So it was very fresh from somewhere. It was either fresh from some kind of tube, some kind of like someone's flowing blood. It's something fresh, as in terms of it hadn't been exposed to elements and the cycle hadn't began.
Right.
That's what I could see.
So it might not even have been Stephen's blood, correct? I mean, they could have used somebody's blood and then just said it was Stephen's, because we know how Sherry is. Could have swapped that up.
This is the biggest thing for me. This is the basic 101 with the case. And this is one of, when I did my experiments, I basically came down to 3 conclusions. And even then, I don't even know. My experiments, I'm going to be straight up and straight honest with everyone. It doesn't give you an answer.
Right.
It's more of an understanding. It's so you can kind of, we all sit there. A lot of people think, oh, they've grabbed something lying around that had blood on it, and they've put like a water solution on it, and they've used that. No, it's until you actually see how it works, you don't quite understand the complexity.
And watered down blood isn't going to give you the right DNA.
No, it's not going to give you the DNA, the texture, and the way it formatted on that, the surfaces and how it dropped and the patterns that we do see. It looks to me controlled. The reason why it looks controlled, even from just looking at it, is because you don't have when you drop, and I do this in one of my experiments, I dropped blood from my finger naturally. Just let it drop from up as you would, because if you're dripping blood and you're not paying attention to it, it's when it hits the surfaces, it splatters out. It oblongs out, like it gives like
a donut kind of.
Yeah, like a thing. And you see like it spreads, like it's
thinner in the middle and thicker on the outside.
Yeah, you don't see that. It's a clean drop. And you think, well, does that mean it was controlled from a certain distance? Because you got to remember, blood changes when you have, diameter is a part of the equation. The amount of blood becomes a part of the equation. There's so many factors to blood. That's why it was so hard to do these experiments, because you have to take into account of every single variable to this experiment. You have to consider, were they sitting down when they dropped the blood? Were they leaning in and dropping the blood? You have to literally break down. And that's what I did. I thought of every possible thing, and I tried to see what would work.
And you couldn't get blood crust either. You got blood flake.
I got blood flakes because what happened was, when the blood, and I was going there, but I got sidetracked, apology. When I was doing my experiments, and I realized once I dropped the blood on my material, I left it. I didn't touch it. I made it sure that it was as authentic as possible. There was no, influences of anything happening to it. What I was finding was, naturally, whether it was EDTA or fresh, it would flake. It would
Mhm.
automatically crust and flake and just drop. So when people say to me, oh, you don't bleed flakes, that's the biggest proof that there was planting. I get that. I really used to believe that as well. But in saying that now, when I did this experiment, I also now consider another option. And that option is maybe, like you saw in the car yourself, when you saw it peel by itself,
Yeah.
maybe the blood was dropped on a surface that we didn't see.
Mhm.
And it just naturally flaked off by itself over time, which is very, very possible because I
Oh
watched
yeah.
it happen numerous times.
It was unbelievable to me. I seen a perfectly drop of blood. The next thing you know, the sides are peeling up. Then it just went pop, just like
Yeah.
somebody just flicked it right off a hole. It didn't even break, nothing. It just popped off one whole drop. Didn't even the
Yes.
surface that it was on, you couldn't even tell there was blood there. I mean, I'm sure if you did a luminol, you might see it, but you could not by the naked eye see that there was a blood drop there at all. It didn't even seep into the
Yeah.
sides, into any of the grooves. So yeah, I mean, I watched it and it was a lot to learn. You really, I mean, it was bravo. I'll just say bravo for you doing
Yeah.
that. I know you were
I
pretty
became I
painstaking.
became a bit anemic by the end of it because the amount
I
of
bet.
blood that I was
I mean, I
losing.
remember you laying this doll out and going like this. I'm like, oh Lord, she's just doing it all, you know. But you know, if you want to know, you got to try to set, you know, as close to what was going on as to what you're testing. And you did.
Yeah.
You tried to get the temperatures right, the surfaces right, you know, the amounts, everything. I mean, and bravo to you for doing it because, I mean, I learned a lot. I thought it would be easy. You know what I'm
No,
saying? I mean, because you
definitely not.
see
And then
blood, you take a wet paper towel, you go like this, it's soaked up, you figure, hey, there it is. But no, it's
I even went
watered
to
down.
yeah. I even went back to the extent of in the experiments. I even went back to check to see because when I was sitting with the doctors, we even went as far as, again, this will all be shown, but we mapped out the standard anatomy of the finger. We went to look at what exactly is
Wow.
in that area of the finger, what would have
Which
been
would be
affected,
this
what
area right
veins,
here.
what muscle, what everything about that finger.
Mhm.
And the placement of it. So when you bend it, does it make it bleed more? And then we had to take into the fact that it was a scab, so it had already been a wound. Does that
3
affect
days
it?
old or
So
something.
yeah, so then me and the doctors had to talk about, you know, the wound itself and how that would affect the bleeding and what it meant. And then I even had to consider whether Stephen Avery was on any medications because that can change your blood.
Right. Coagulate
Um,
fast or make you bleed.
yeah, especially blood thinners, you would bleed more than
Yeah.
usual. And it has a certain element like an EDTA. It prolongs your blood from coagulating
Hmm.
longer.
Yep.
So I considered that as a factor as well. So I had to go back to the beginning and go through all the documents to see if I could find if Stephen was on anything. And things like that. And then I literally, the biggest thing for me was I went back to Kathleen's experiment and I wanted to really read how it was done. And Carla, from, you know, everyone knows Carla.
Mhm.
She was helping me throughout it and she was sending me documents and we were
Carla
going
Black.
through. Yeah, Carla
Yep.
Black, yep. And we were going through it all and we were really trying to, you know, which is Avery Wave. And
Mhm.
we were really trying to, you know, get in there and siphon through that real detailed of how Kathleen's, you know, expert conducted it. And to my shock, and I went back and watched the man, he used Purple Tops, EDTA.
Yeah.
So a lot of her experiments were done using
With-
always
with-
EDTA blood.
Yeah. Blood that wouldn't coagulate.
Because it wouldn't
like-
coagulate. However, she did do a thing like me. She did 2 experiments with the sink. She did do one with EDTA blood, and she did have one of her, I think it was like a paralegal assistant, someone on her team actually give blood. So she did do it with fresh blood.
Wow.
So she did make sure that she balanced both the experiments out. But back then, she was still going for EDTA. And ironically, they were kind of, you know, stating that EDTA was possible. I think what changed for Kathleen was when she realized there was no way of proving that. She
Right.
realized it was time to move on. She had to find another source.
Right.
The sink is the only other source
Just
that
like
she's aware of.
Jerry
that she
and
thinks.
Dean did too.
Yeah.
They had to find another source for the blood.
Yeah.
It just wasn't right. Right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there was no clear cut anything outside of, you really don't think somebody could have just went in there with a paper towel or swabs? That would not be going on. So, at least not
So
the way they showed
it's
it.
it's not possible. It's just
Right.
not plausible because you
Right.
have so many factors working against you. You need the biggest problem for Kathleen right now is when I went back and looked at all the statements, took it back to the very beginning, the only person that you can actually say with a guarantee that they knew Stephen even bled that night. And that doesn't mean that he even had anything to do with planning of the blood. I'm just saying on a face value, who actually just knew he bled was Chuck Avery. And that's only because he jumped into the truck with Chuck to go straight to Menards.
Right.
And that's basically unless Chuck didn't even realize that Stephen had just taped his finger up, he might not have even known. But that's the
Might not
only
even have noticed.
yeah, that's the only person that you can clear cut say had the potential to even know that night. And well, by the time they got back, there's no way Chuck would have been able to use the sink blood because they were gone for hours. The
Yeah.
blood would have been spoiled within 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other problem the other problem I have is when I went back and looked at the documents, you've got so many changing statements and people, saying where someone was and one was, and and unfortunately for Stephen, how to say this nicely,
You just say it.
he changed his timeline significantly to fit Bobby as being able to see it to where we
To see
began.
him. Yeah.
So when you start with him stating the order of what happened, and then 10 years later it changes to another narrative to then fit Bobby in it, that worries me because you shouldn't have to
You shouldn't have to change the truth.
No,
You
the truth
you
is
don't have
already
to
set.
rewrite the truth, right?
Exactly right. The truth is the truth. You shouldn't have to. Mind
right.
you, sometimes you don't realize it was the truth until you kind of have someone help you construct it back together. And I
Right.
can see that could be possible. Kathleen's helped him reactivate the memory, but the problem is I have a problem with Stephen Avery's memory. We have a gentleman who couldn't even remember if he had a fire on the 31st, and that caused a
Right.
lot of controversy in the case because you'll just say, oh, he denied the fire. No, I generally think he
He
honestly
doesn't remember.
remember.
I don't
Because it
think
was-
any of them do. I really don't. I think
And
their
that's-
days blend together.
And I think that's the problem with me with the blood. And I'm going to come out and say it for me right now. Stephen, blood theory is interesting. And I'm glad Kathleen's exploring it.
Mhm.
But we're trusting a man's memory, a photographic memory of how he thinks the blood looked. And we have to consider this is a man that can't even remember if he had a fire. So
You can't rely on anybody's memory
can't,
for
you know, and
IDing anything.
the thing that I had a problem with is he's bled into the sink, and I just can't picture myself thinking he's looking at it going, I need to remember what this looks like
Yeah.
because this is going to be used against me in a
Yeah.
few days' time. I don't. I struggle with that logically. I just can't. So I do think he bled. There is evidence that he did drop in there. I guarantee he did. There is absolutely proof he dropped in there. I just
Right.
don't think it was at the extent that
Not enough to take
it
or
wasn't enough to use, and it wasn't enough to go back and go, someone took it, because there's the photos we have kind of contradict that.
yeah, there's
And
only
once
little
I get into
drops.
that, when I get into that and I put it all together and show everyone like how important that is, it will then tell the story.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying that the blood in the sink is debunked. I'm not in
Oh,
any
no.
position to say that. I'm just saying, for me, my opinion, no.
Yeah.
I think it's an option that has to be explored because, unfortunately, right now, it's the only option that's left.
I'm a firm believer that there was no blood in it at all till it got to the crime lab, and then Sherry Culhane did her little thing. That's my belief. You know.
Oh, there's
But-
definitely a lot of people, at the end of the day, there's a lot of controversy around that,
Right.
because there's so many. Again, it goes into the factors, and I'll have to go through all these. Like, for example, if the blood was in the RAV before it got dumped, that means that they would have had to have found it. That
Mhm.
means, what does that mean for the new Tom Skowinski thing? What does it mean for the Uyghur? Sorry, is it Siebert's?
Yep,
Witnesses?
Siebert.
It changes so many factors. Was it placed? There's a lot of people that understand that the RAV goes missing for over an hour and a bit on the transfer from the salvage yard to the crime lab. Where did it go? It
Yep.
took extra time. Was that
Supposedly put on one way and exited off
Yeah.
another way.
And there's people that think that it's possible that it didn't get done until it hit the crime lab, where it was in a controlled area when people weren't around. Someone
Yeah.
went in and went there and did a job. A lot of people have to understand that, I did bring this up on Jeff Jones, which will be released, because we do talk about blood in that next episode, but I'll bring it up here if you don't mind me.
No, go right ahead.
A lot of people get stuck with this because they're like, oh, why would cops plant blood if they didn't even know Stephen's finger bled? At the end of the day, how much information do you need to know about that wound to have someone plant the blood? Fantastic theory, like fantastic observation, because that does play a part. Who would need to know about the finger? Really, in all honesty, unless it came from the sink, you don't need to know about Stephen's finger, because you don't need a cut to bleed. The narrative was controlled by the state. They
Yep.
could have placed the blood in there not knowing about Stephen's finger and turned around and said, oh, the blood came in there because in the scuffle with Teresa, she bumped his nose and his nose bled. That's where
Yeah.
your blood came from. You
Yeah.
don't actually need a wound. The wound was an advantage for somebody.
Right. And who knows? I think the blood placement was the last resort thing. You know what I mean?
So
it was-
the blood placement, everyone, this is my opinion, everyone. Don't shoot me down. I think a lot of people say the placement of the blood is so planted, and of course it's fucking planted. But the thing is, everyone's like, oh, it doesn't make sense. Everyone needs to just chill for a minute and do what I did. I stopped looking at it like on the defense side and trying to fight against it. I looked at it when I did my experiments as someone's trying to tell me a story. Let's follow this story and see what it is they're trying to tell me. And Ken Karatz actually kind of sets the foundation for it, because everyone's like, well, where's the blood on the steering wheel? Where's the cross-contaminated blood in the back? Right? And I get that. But that was where my head first went, 100%.
Yeah.
But Ken doesn't say he drove the car. Ken kind of gives the illusion that the bleeding came when the car was stationary, most likely at that berm where they were adding the materials to it to frame, and that he's cut it open in that time frame, and then he has bled. Of course, there's issues with that, because one, you would expect to see drops in that area on the around the surrounding areas of the dirt.
Yeah,
or
but we
whatever.
know they didn't
You'd
look.
expect to see blood on the material, like the branches and the scraps.
Grass and yeah.
So I get that, but that's part of the story someone wants you to believe. So when I
Yeah.
went back and looked at the spots itself, I looked at the spot in the ignition. I said, well, why would they put it at the ignition if they're not claiming that he drove? You'd put it on the steering wheel. And then I realized, well, the key is the answer. Someone
Mhm.
wanted to put a connection, the
To
ignition,
the key in the car.
the key in the car. And where is the key found? The key is found in Stephen Avery's trailer. So
Yep.
someone's trying to show you a connection. They're trying to show you
He took the key
there's
out.
blood
tried
where
to-
the key would be. Yep. And the key's now missing, and we've found the key. Then I looked at the main spot, the back panel, and you see that big drop. We're going to call it a big drop because it's the most dominant out of all of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would someone place it there? It's very unusual. They didn't put it quite in the back, but they didn't put it in the front. Why
All
are
the
they
way, right.
in the back? Then I realized it's because I think someone was trying to give the illusion he was in the back when he was putting the seats down to put her in the vehicle. So again, this is my interpretation. Everyone else has their own. I'm not forcing
It kind
this
of makes sense to me.
anybody, but they're trying to, because everyone knows she probably didn't go there with her seats down. So someone's trying to show that at one stage someone put the seats down, and if there's no blood showing that, then Dean and Jerry could have said, well, how did she end up in the back and the seats were down if the killer didn't touch it? And I think that's the connection they, again, my opinion, they were trying to make. He was in the back when he was putting the seats down. That's who put the seats down, was Stephen. And you can see that by this drop.
Right.
The CD case is interesting. Everyone goes, why would they drop it on the CD case? It's more of a smear. I'm not even 100% sure there was blood on it. They're claiming that there was 50% of it was smeared. When you look at the swabbing from it, there is not one speck of blood on it. It's kind of like, where's the blood then? Where is it that you tested blood, 50% of blood, when there's, it looks like you've opened a packet of a swab and just took a photo of it. What's going on here? If it was in fact used, maybe it was literally spilt by mistake. I don't know. I don't know, because I don't get the CD case.
We don't even really know if it was on there before. I mean, it could have been on there from her, for all we know. We don't know if it was Stephen's blood that was in there. We just going by what Kel Haynes says, and I don't trust a word she says. Well, she's got magical swabs. That's what I think.
Yeah, and that's what I think it comes down to. If standard 101 procedure, if I was to go forward with any more of this, narrative, I just wish to God, Kathleen, excuse me, if she ever got the RAV, if there was anything salvaged from it that you could get and you could try, I wish someone had independently tested the RAV's blood themselves and definitively said to us, yes, it's Stephen Avery's.
Oh, that's why I'm all for that independent testing.
Right now, we are literally sitting on Sherry Culhane's word. It is. Now, it is a big risk to take. Honestly, when you look at it logically, why would they use someone else's blood? That's almost like the same nonsense as why would they use a second RAV? If you got
blood degrades,
in that guy, you would be fucked, but you would be absolutely, your case is over. Yeah. So I get that, but it is still an option because it is the unknown and there is no, no one trusts Sherry Culhane. In fact, I think, the thing about Sherry is, you only need, for this to be planted, you only actually need her and maybe one person giving her a directive to do it. And you can cut out all the middle shit. You then don't have this wild conspiracy that everyone's running around with vials.
So you got to test anything. She just got to put cotton swabs in the water.
You just have to have her on board and the rest is history. That's it. She either holds the answers or something else happened somewhere. By the time she holds answers. She was also under the illusion that it was Stephen, but something somewhere.
They got that. What do they call that? Confirmational bias, where they believe they're helping by adding the extra thing that'll nab them. So maybe she really believed it. This time it was him. I'm not going to let him get out since I let him get out with the hair testing, So she said, okay, I'll make sure,
Well, we have that infamous, writing she did herself where she wrote herself a note saying was it Fassbender, try to place her in the garage or the trailer.
And then the deviation that she wrote herself.
And then, and that's, here's the irony of it. If it did come from the lab, let's just theorize this just quickly, and it is theorizing, everyone. Let's say that she did have a part in this. The deviation side of it is quite clever because she has set herself a standard that if it ever came back that she was responsible, she could then fall back on that and go, hey, listen, I was under pressure. I must have made another mistake. I was making mistakes throughout this whole entire case because, I was limited. I was overstretched with hours, whatever the excuse was. But she can then blame it on the lab procedures rather than her own malicious intent.
She was the one with the most mistakes in her whole lab. She was the one that had the most mistakes. So she could just play dumb blonde with the hair up to here, too much spray. And look at who Dr. Suckman says, who controlled the narrative about the blood and the DNA results.
There you go.
Yeah, for sure. Hello,
so
Paul.
Again, I wanted to do it because I wanted to understand it for me as well. In a sense, I think I'm very vocal in saying that, I don't know who killed
Just tell her
Trina.
like you think it, and you don't think it's possible that it went that way. It
No,
did not come from
and I
a
don't think
sink.
it didn't come from the sink. And the thing for me is right now is I've stopped trying to work out who killed her, because I don't
Mhm.
think that's possible, because there's too many pieces of the puzzle missing. It's impossible because we don't have all the answers.
Right.
What I think everyone needs to really understand now where we're at is where are we at now and what needs to happen to change the case. And you know what? I say I don't look for the killer anymore, because even if they found the killer, I still don't think that's going to change anything, especially, and I'm saying especially, and I wish you could see me putting up my like quotation marks above my head here. If it's a Dassey or Avery,
Especially-
if it was a Dassey or Avery, they're not going to trade Brendan and Stephen in for another one of their own. They're just going to add them to the list and go, you know what?
You're
Yep,
going
you're
to.
right. It was probably, theoretically, it was probably Bobby, but oops, it's not that he did it and framed them, or we
Be the
framed him.
third.
We just
what
missed
is
it.
that?
He
Yeah.
was the third person that we missed.
Third
Oops,
ejaculator or something they call
Yeah.
it. Yep.
so that's the problem. I'm not looking for who did it anymore. That's
Yeah.
up to the courts and Kathleen.
No,
And
I don't think they'd win it on that. Who did it anyway? Honestly, I think they need to win it on court procedures and his civil rights,
Yeah,
and
it's basically that. What's going to get him free now? And I'm going to
Mhm.
be honest with you, and I know Silkman will be sitting here probably high-fiving me when I say this, because we are on the same page. It comes down to the blood in the RAV. And I say that because when you go through all the evidence that we have and everything we've got, you can take away you can almost explain every other forensic evidence that was placed against him. The key, the bullet, the swab lab, oh my God, tongue twister, the hood latch, all of that. You could literally kind of throw that into like the reasonable doubt bin. You could make great arguments that could cause, but you cannot get past that fucking blood.
The
Because
DNA.
the DNA is someone knew how so important that blood was to this case. DNA got him out, and DNA has him locked in.
Yep.
It is like the ultimate fuckery.
And how do you prove it? By getting rid of everything. That's how you keep the conviction. There's nothing to test.
Yeah, it is absolutely the blood in the RAV, because no matter what Kathleen presents, if let's say she went for another trial, and I'm not qualified to say this is how it's going to go. I have got no legal expertise.
Right.
I'm not trying to claim I do, but using my logic, and this is how I look at the case, and this is how I suggest people look at it. People always say to me, why are you so logical and how do you do it? This is honestly how I do it. You have to be. I get myself into a bit of trouble sometimes, because what I do is I look at both sides. So when I think of something, I'll go, for example, I can't even think of something at the top of my head, but I'll look at something and I'll go, okay, could the blood have come from the sink? And then I'll look at it like it could have. And then
what
I
are the
look
risk
at it
factors
like it
of
can't.
getting it, doing it? Yeah.
What are the factors to get it? And then I go, okay, now I have to always reverse it. I have to look at the other side. Does that make sense if I look at it like how it did not come from the sink? And that's how I weigh it up. And like Tom Skowinski, like affidavit, I looked at it and I was like, okay, what does that mean to the case? And then I looked at it like all the positives and how it could change. And then I went, okay, now I need to flip it. What will the state be thinking about this? And what will they use against her? And then I came up with all the negatives. And that's what you have to do, because you have to have balance.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm getting myself into trouble. I've been going on a few podcasts and I've been calling out some things that isn't, like, listen, I think both the men are absolutely
Yeah, I do too.
absolutely innocent, but I'm not going to tippy-toe around the truth.
Proving that they're innocent isn't the easiest thing to do, whether you think they are or not. What the state did to them is make sure a conviction is going to stick.
Yeah. The thing is, I think they're absolutely innocent, but I'm not going to tippy-toe around the bullshit either. At the end of the day, Stephen changed some narratives, and it butterflied affect the case. You know, I get that. He made some random decisions on that day that he'd never done before. Does it make him a murderer? Fuck no. I touched base on these things is because the state, I'm not saying anything that the state, one, hasn't already said, or two, they won't say.
Right.
You have to find balance, because if you don't look at it for its whole, you're going to get yourself biased. And if you get yourself biased, what you then will do is you'll block out all the new information that can come in, and then you'll miss shit because you're so stuck in thinking what you think. That's not good.
Yeah, and you got to think of this as this was not a planned out weekly. Oh, we're going to do this step, this step, this step. I do believe a lot of this was just at the last moment. They decided this is what they needed, and boom, they did it. And it just, the way they covered it up by not investigating, by the pictures you don't see and the reports you don't read. But honestly, the only thing they needed was a conviction and keeping it there.
Now that's what it's all about now.
Keeping it there is by getting rid of all the DNA. And that's exactly what Sherry did.
And that's where we're at now. It's not about proving who did it anymore.
Right.
For them. They don't give a shit. It's about keeping that conviction.
Yeah.
Making sure that if Kathleen does go anywhere with her motions, it gets stopped at the door. And that's what they've done.
And knowing that DNA is usually only the way you're going to turn over a conviction.
This is actually I've been doing a lot of case studies, and I go deep into my statistics, and I really try to work out stuff. And I managed to get documents from the Innocent Project of all their kind of wrongful convictions and their statistics on it. And I was reading it to Silkman and Jeff Jones and Big Jeff yesterday as we finish our podcast recording, and we were all kind of like, wow, because it breaks down the statistics of, wrongful convictions and false
improper ID,
but all the misidentification. And I looked at that, and the
73%, I think.
Misidentifications now is the leading cause for wrongful convictions. And then I look at it, and then I think, far out, Kathleen's going with her Denny,
eyewitness,
and it's based on an identification from Tom Skowinski, and automatically that's 73% of a chance that he didn't see Bobby Dassey.
Right.
Now,
because you can tell your mind
person. Because you can tell your mind saying it's called influence, and there's a breakdown of statistics of all the reasons why. And you want to hear the scary thing? One of the biggest statistics is, and I brought it up because it was part of the 1985 case, but it was their own victims. The victims itself is 83%
wrong on identification,
misidentification. And then you have the lineups and the photo arrays and the percentages of all that. And there's been people that have been
32%, I think, by eyewitness, wasn't it? Isn't it 32% eyewitness of the victim that gets it wrong? I think that's what it was.
Yes, something on those lines. I've got the documents in the other
room.
I
do too. I just made a video on some of it. So it was like, it's fresh in my mind because I've been following what makes it. And I was really surprised to see that misidentification was like number one now. It used to be eyewitness, and then that's second, I think. And then false confessions is third.
Yeah. So I know. And then it's just a really, really great read.
Yeah, it is.
It was really informative. It's really logical, not logical. It's very statistic based. So it's factual. And that's what you need in this case.
It's the most breakdown I've ever seen of it, actually.
It is.
I mean, last year I read it and it wasn't that broke down. The statistics were just kind of bland there and there. And this was like broke down into different segments of the eyewitness, not seeing it, of the witness seeing a picture, if the witness seeing a lineup, they broke it down in the different categories. I thought it was really interesting. Yeah. And you can find it on innocenceproject.com or org.
It's all there. The documents there.
And Kel will be talking about it too. So watch for that. So
this has been great, but I actually have to go. The school sirens just gone.
It's been 1 hour. So goes fast.
It does.
But you'll just have to come back and we'll talk some more about.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
If anyone wants to talk blood or know more about what I did, let me know. I'm happy to talk to people. I'm happy to show people. It's just that I haven't been able to format like a like a plan of releasing it all as a whole yet.
It's
as a
very
structure.
interesting. Very good work.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
I could talk the blood all day because something that I stepped aside from the case to really focus on. Again, don't be disappointed, guys. It doesn't give you a conclusion. It's still open for interpretation, but it gives you an understanding.
Yep. And it was really, really good. Thank you so much for doing it.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for being here. Everybody,
Thank you for
say goodbye to Cal.
See you guys.
See you guys later.
If you have desires, a girl in your life is making you feel that fire. Go fight for her man, go die for her man. Cause you only have one life, one chance to do it. One chance to prove it to yourself, so don't lose it. You got this fam, just keep pushing on through it. One day you'll look back so glad you pursued it. Yeah, things are gonna get better real soon. Yeah, I'ma just do me, you just do you. I swear it's gonna get better real soon. Don't let anyone tell you what you should do. I gotta